Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of My Future Energy Career. My name is Jalen, and I am joined today by our STEM hero, Allison Leggett. Welcome, Allison.
Hi, hello everyone. It's so lovely to be here and to meet everyone. My name is Allison Wilson Leggett, and my title is University Administrator. So I'm looking forward to recognizing the events that led me to a STEM career and that will lead you and promote you to be a STEM hero.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your introduction, Allison. And without further ado, I will hand it off to you, and you can get started with talking about your career.
Okay, absolutely. So, as a university administrator, I serve as a visionary. I facilitate learners in attaining their dreams through advanced education. So, you might think, well, what do you mean advanced education? Isn't being in middle school or high school enough? Well, we hope that after middle school, you go on to high school, and after high school, you go on to college. But don't just stop at an associate degree, even though you can do a lot with that. And don't just stop with a bachelor's degree. You can do a lot with that as well. But go on beyond your heart's desire and get a master's degree, even get two master's degrees, and go beyond that and get a doctoral degree. So make a promise to yourself that you will be unique in attaining advanced education.
Thank you for sharing about that. And now we'll move on to some of your hobbies.
I would say, as far back as I can remember, I absolutely loved amusement park rides. Why did I love them? I think because of the thrill, the excitement. Now, I didn't like waiting in long lines, but what I did like was the thrill and the speed. I think I was addicted a little bit to speed. In loving amusement park rides, I also share if I wasn't able to go to those parks, I love simple things like roller skate riding. I absolutely love doing that. For some reason, I was self taught in ice skating as well. I never had a lesson, but I'm able to ice skate. And I love driving race cars. So if you take a look at least three of those, they all deal with speed and being first.
And next, we'll go into your career as a NASA scientist.
Okay, my exciting part of my career. So one day in high school, my college counselor told me to go to El Segundo, California for a job. So I went to the interview. They said, wonderful, you will get started working in science and mathematics. I did not know exactly what that meant because I was just a young teen at the time. So I was connected with some NASA scientists, and the first thing was they asked me a lot of questions because, of course, I was the youngest person there. They said, well, what are your interests? What do you want to do when you grow up? And at that time, I said, well, I have a family member, my mother, who has a terminal disease. And what I'd like to do is find a cure. That was the only answer that I had as a child, that I wanted to find a cure for my mother. My mother was ill, and I wanted to find a cure for her. And they said, well, that's what science can do. Working as a research scientist can lead to cures for diseases. So I said, well, that's what I want to do then. I want to be the person that will cure my mother. So in the NASA department or division of physical and chemical studies, they don't deal directly with curing diseases. What they did do, though, was deal directly with various divisions of anything dealing with rockets, let's say. There are limits to what I can share, so I will only share that I worked with rocket fuels. So I did that for one summer, and I kept coming back summer after summer after summer. And every year I learned new things. So that is where I go on to the next slide and talk about more on the rocket fuels and burning the fastest. We don't want them to burn too fast. You don't want them getting halfway to the moon and dropping back down to Earth. So we ask about inhibitors that are used. Inhibitors that were used a couple of decades ago contained lead. And if you ever heard about lead, you may have think of some negative things about lead. And there are a few negative things. One positive thing is that it did inhibit. It did what we mean slow down the burning of rocket fuel. I say that slowly to have you think about this. You don't want the rocket fuel to burn quickly and you're done and you have to land back to Earth. You want it to kind of pace itself where it makes it all the way to the moon. And guess what? All the way back. You don't want it to burn out and you don't want it to catch on fire either. You want it to kind of be a slow burn. As a consultant, supervisor, designer, teacher, science advocate, I am a university professor. My first teaching job as a university professor was teaching organic chemistry at California State University, Los Angeles. I'll never forget that first day. It was really a natural for me to be now in front of folks who were adults, young adults, and they were really fascinated about organic chemistry. And I absolutely, absolutely loved it. And ultimately, I worked as a consultant because of my background. I could work with districts, I could work with schools, I could work as a science fair judge. I worked in some technology as well. And I guess my biggest skill, and one of the things I like working with, is those that are obtaining their bachelor's of science and master's of science degrees or doctoral degrees and their credentials to become math and science teachers, and actually elementary teachers as well.
And we'll move right along into your educational pathway.
Okay. Well, I am a UCLA Bruin, having attained my Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and mathematics. Remember earlier I talked about at NASA, and when they asked me, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to find a cure for my mother's disease. Well, sadly, fortunately, my mother did pass away, and I actually changed my field. I started off as a pre-pharmacy major at UCLA. I did actually get into two universities. I only applied to two, and luckily I got into both universities. I applied to USC and to UCLA. I got into USC on a full ride for pharmacy. But I think after, when my mother passed away, I kind of shifted my thoughts. I was pre-pharmacy at UCLA, but I switched to chemistry and mathematics. So I went that route. I could still go into pharmacy school. I also, at the time, while I was working at NASA, I attended UCLA. I was kind of leaning less toward the pharmacy route and more toward the what's called physical science route. So less of the life sciences that dealt with life and more of the physical sciences that dealt with speed and motion. I ultimately obtained a Master's of Arts degree in kind of a triple. So psychology, early childhood, and technology, because I didn't know which direction I wanted to go in. I liked the technology, but they offered it with early childhood. And I said, well, maybe one day. And then psychology, I don't think we could ever learn enough about the study of the mind. Ultimately, I got a second master's in science in administration, and that helped attune my thoughts as a university administrator as well as district level administrator.
And next, we'll go into some things you had to learn to get where you are today.
Oh, so many lessons, and there's not enough time in a day to explain each of them. But I think the top four are these. Everyone has a talent. You need to find yours and capitalize on it. I was not outgoing at all in high school, elementary school, and elementary school. In fact, in middle school, I was profoundly shy, and that is actually a clinical term, to be profoundly shy. What that means is that you literally don't utter a word in public because of whatever conditions. You're either scared or you're not confident. And I think mainly I was scared and lacked confidence. And there was a lot of concern about that. And I think partly was because I didn't find myself. And I think a lot of times as teenagers, as elementary kids, as high schoolers, you don't quite know, or you're not cultivated in a way to find what's good for you. Sometimes others influence you and say, hey, I can play basketball, you can too. Or I can roller skate, you can too, without you being the leader and saying, no, I can draw really well. That's what I can do. And so find what makes you smile and capitalize on it. It could be something as simple as drawing, for which you help somebody younger than you to do that as well. It could be something like basketball. It could be something like sports. It could be something for which no one sees but you, such as studying really hard. Did you know that that's a talent as well? You can tap in on that. You can help your friends study real hard too. But you definitely want to think about a subject that you like as well, because that's going to define what you will study in college. It's never too early to start thinking about it, nor is it ever too late to make your dream a reality. There's not someone that's too young to fulfill a dream or someone too old to fulfill a dream. It's all about perspective. If you have a dream, for instance, of being a concert pianist, you may never have had any training of being a concert pianist, no training at all, but basic hard work and learning how to play a singular song. Well, with the internet, you can post yourself playing that song and therefore dub yourself as being a concert pianist. It's all about perspective. You can invite your friends. You can have a big gathering remotely for people to watch you, and you can dress up and have a big to do about it. So always think about what you want to do, because you never want to ever feel regret for not having done it. And never put anyone down, because you never know when you may need them to build you up. And then always be yourself and go for your dreams.
Next, we will go into some advice you can offer our students.
Absolutely. Think about the future. What do you think life will be like in 30 years? Remember, that was one of the questions I always challenge my physical science students with. And that picture there, that graphic there, identifies an example of some of the various ways for which they thought of the future. Some thought it would be an underwater lifestyle, and some thought it would be on on the moon, and some thought it would be underground under the earth. So think about what life will be like in 30 years. What are your talents, and how can you strengthen them? So beyond identifying them, now the bigger challenge is, how do you strengthen them? So one important element is, how do you strengthen them? And then lastly, who do you want to be your mentor? I think it's very important to recognize that some dreams need a little help, and it's not going to hurt you to be supported by someone. So think about who could be your mentor. It could be someone that you know, it could be somebody that you've reached out to. And with the internet, you can reach out to people in a safe way, but do make sure that your parents are involved. Absolutely 100% that your parents are involved.
We'll move on to our last section.
Mhm.
And my last question for you today is, I think it's a misconception for young people to think once they get a job, they have to know everything and have all the skills for that job. And I love how when you're talking about NASA, you got onboarded and they said, oh, you'll be working in science and mathematics. And you said, oh, I'm not quite sure what that means. It's apparent that once we get a job, we're still learning while we're on the job. And my question is, what is the most valuable or your favorite skill or thing that you learned while on a job?
There are so many skills that you can learn, but I think beyond the what's called hard skills that you learn, for instance, in mathematics or engineering, even in engineering, there's a lot of calculations, there's a lot of formulas. And if you get one segment wrong on that formula, it's going to give you an error on your calculation. So beyond the hard skills of recognizing the details, all of the details that need to be there, the signs, the exclamation marks or the power buttons, beyond the balancing of the equations for chemistry, beyond the units that are needed for physics, and beyond the life science biology elements that you have to recognize for cleanliness and making sure that organic substances are kept away from building bacteria, is learning about soft skills. And that is a newer term to learn and understand. We are not isolated in this world. We have to work with others for the greater good of mankind. So, learning more about yourself, what makes you tick and what makes others tick, that psychology element. Remember, I studied some psychology. Learning about how you get along with others will make a remarkable difference in your elevation in your jobs. I think there are a lot of people, and over time, you're going to master all the hard skills in the world. But for you to be promoted and for you to be recognized as an expert in your area beyond your hard skills is to actually have what's called people skills or soft skills, and learning how to project and help others build their skills, I think is primary for you as a lesson to learn.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, that wraps up the interview. I just want to take this time to give out a huge, huge thank you to Allison for coming on this webinar and sharing about your educational and career pathway.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous blessing to share this important element about STEM and how it led me to where I am today. I wouldn't be where I am today without thinking about my goals at an earlier age and actually acting upon them. So reach out to others and tell them about this story, and hopefully that will influence them to live their dreams.
Awesome. Yeah. And I also want to take this time to give a huge thank you to everyone watching. If you want to see more interviews like this one, you can visit our YouTube channel, The Energy Coalition, or you can go to peakstudents.org to view our full library.